We are live?
Yes, sir.
All right. Hey, guys. Hey, everybody. Hope you all are having an amazing day on purpose. Want to give a little bit of an economic update, what we're seeing, do some Q&A, and at least get what I think is going on out there so that you guys know what we're doing and you can copy and or adjust as needed. Now, I should say I am not a licensed financial advisor, so take everything I give you with a grain of salt and go do your own research. I'm just providing thoughts and context for what I'm seeing out there, because these days the media is garbage. I mean, right now you're seeing layoffs at CNN, MSNBC. There's jokes all over Twitter about maybe Musk will buy MSNBC. So we have to go to people that we trust for information. I've got a whole bunch of folks that I trust, and if I'm one of those that you trust, I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your questions, your comments, your shares, your likes, being a subscriber, all of that different stuff. So, all right, let's jump in first. We have a new president. I think that I went live shortly after the election. There's a bunch of debate as to why the Democrats lost, why the Republicans won, and I know for all of my haters out there, somebody's going to be like, oh, we don't have a new president yet. That's not till January 20th or whatever. Yeah, I get that. But we've elected a new president. We have a presidential election, not an inauguration. With that, we're already getting announcements of major policy changes that are coming. I mean, it looks like we're going to, repeal the mandate on electric cars. That'll be wildly good for productivity, okay? Looks like we're going to get completely different energy policy. That's going to be insane. Guys, this is nothing but positive. That is going to lower costs for the average American. Let me explain why, okay? Because right now you got some pundits in the news saying, oh, Trump's going to be all inflation, Trump's going to be inflation, and where there are aspects of what Trump is saying that are highly inflationary. And as you have questions and comments as I'm going through, please chime them in, and I'll stop in a minute and let Dominique over here bring the questions to the surface so that we can kind of update on that. But Trump's tariff plan is, if he does it as he says he's going to do it, highly inflationary. If we go and tell all the producer nations, because we're more of a consumer nation at this point, that hey, we're going to ramp up the cost to all of our consumers to buy your products as the producers, that's going to increase the price of everything, giving more revenue, yes, to our government, but taking it effectively from the consumer that purchased the product from whatever country and or factory in that country that produced it, right? So Trump's tariffs will, if acted in the way that all the fearmongers are talking, be highly inflationary. Is Trump going to do those tariffs that way? I mean, he's coming out and saying that. He's saying, oh, at least 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China day one. And look, Trump is going to do some tariffs. There's no doubt. Trump has been one that has, he wants the top job. He wants to be the top guy. He needs to honor the campaign promises that he says so that he can have the legacy of the great president that he wants to have, right? He's going to do some tariffs. Is he going to do what we're fear-mongering about at this point? I don't think so. I don't see it. Like, Trump is a businessman. That's his history. He's an investor. That's his history. He's a real estate guy. That's his history. And he's also a builder. Like, he's a developer. That's his history. So he's not... developers, real estate people, they're inflation sensitive. He's not going to go crash the economy. He's not flying blind like people that are outside of the market becoming politicians or basically working in politics 40, 50, 60 years and then later, running for office as the president and pretending like they know what's going on when they've never had a real job. That's not him. Like, he has been an operator of a business. So his appointment of the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, was really well received yesterday, and it was received actually yesterday, the last 2 days, I think. It was received well because Scott Bessent is very negative on tariffs. He's loved by the bond traders. We saw huge moves in the Treasury bonds yesterday, which, yes, that infected mortgages. And the reason for that is mortgage-backed securities, Treasury bonds, bond traders, I mean, these are some of the most sophisticated traders out there. They have to put an arbitrage on everything they do to make sure that they're safe given whatever's coming, right? And so Trump going out and saying tariff, I'm going to do this and this and this, That's how his lips are moving. His feet are moving in a very different way. He's saying he's going to put the economy first, the American people first, balanced approach first. He's still going to do some tariffs, but he's using that as a negotiation tool to get China in line and to get our other trading partners in line to create more fairness, more jobs, more opportunities for Americans. Okay, so his energy policy should not be inflationary. In fact, it should deflate energy. One of the funny things about inflation does not, at least the inflation we look at for the metrics that we're using, does not include food, fuel, and construction materials. So energy, construction materials, which is your house and your car, energy, which is how you power your house, power your car, heating, cooling, electric bill, gas, whatever, and food. These are the three leading expenses of an American consumer. So, when we're sitting there and saying, oh, the inflation rate was at its peak 9%. Yeah, right. Like multiply that by 3x, because that's what the actual consumer felt, okay? When eggs went up, 100, 200, 300% at some point, and maybe they came down to 150 or 200% higher. I mean, every single item in the inflation metric has to be kind of reviewed as to what it went up and down as, but nothing is below what it was in 2019. So as we look at kind of what's going on in our world, and we're thinking, okay, well, how are Trump's lips moving? How are Trump's feet moving? What's the real net effect going to be to the American consumer who feels things differently than the Fed actually measures it? The Fed is not measuring for the benefit of the American. The Fed is measuring for the benefit of the American government, okay? If the Fed finds that inflation is a lower number, then when the government does their cost of living increases, and there's a substantial amount of government employees, guys, like if you just look at like the cost of just our Department of Defense, that would be one of the largest countries in the world if we looked at just GDP of the Department of Defense, right? Like, so the departments within our government are bigger than most other governments on the planet. How many government employees are there? Well, if the Fed comes out and says, hey, inflation's averaging at 2.6% or 2.7%, even if it was 7 or 8% to you because you had to pay the higher cost in food, energy, construction materials, they're not going to give you your cost of living increase based on what the actual cost of living increase was. They're going to give it to you based on what the adjusted numbers were, okay? That's why it's X, food, and energy, okay? So let's jump into another thing that will be not deflationary, but very, very good for keeping inflation under control, and that's the Doge thing. That's Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and they're coming in as Doge, Department of Government Efficiency. And no, they're not part of the government. They're more advisors to the government. So I know there's a lot of fear mongering, depending on the media you watch, on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But effectively, they're going in and they're looking at what is wasteful, and they're talking about cutting waste. There are estimates as high as them cutting $2 trillion, which is about what our deficit is, guys. If they can cut $2 trillion of government waste, I mean, you got to think about it. What does our government do? Like, if you go to Lowe's and buy a hammer, it might be $2 to $25, depending on the hammer, the brand, the quality, whatever, right? Like, the government somehow found a way to spend $25,000 on the same hammer. Like, you can't tell me there's not waste in that metric. Like, if you run a business, you're required to have some efficiency. If you run a government, you're not. You're actually rewarded for inefficiency. This boils down to the way that businesses and governments do budgets, okay? I think this is one of the biggest issues, and I hope that Musk and Ramaswamy look at this, but if you work in government, like my mom, she was a counselor, and before that she was a science teacher, and she got a budget every year for what she was allowed to spend from the school district for her kids, for the benefit of the education of the children she taught, right? And it was interesting because she knew the rule, and this is common, this is standard practice in government. Like, if you don't spend all of your budget or even exceed your budget, they actually shrink your budget the next year. Meaning, fundamentally, you are penalized. You are penalized, guys, for being smart with how you spend money if you work for the government. Whereas in a business, it's different. You're actually rewarded if you don't spend too much. Like, if you spend too much, you lose money. If you spend the right amount, you make money, okay? Think about that. Like, just the way that the private sector and the public sector does budgeting is enough to probably save hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars. Outside of that, if you were to turn around and say, okay, well, where are there inefficiencies? Where are there people that are, frankly not necessary? I mean, one problem with government action is governments create immortal laws. Like, you and I are mortal. Like, Texas has a a law on the books that has been memorialized, and it's you can shoot a Native American from the second story of a hotel window or a hotel balcony, but not a buffalo. I mean, that's insane. That doesn't even make sense. Like, I mean, at this point, like, Native American would probably qualify. Anybody that has Hispanic, you know, background might be Native American. Can you imagine if that law was still relevant? Yet somehow it's still in the fucking books. Like, this needs to be removed from the books because it's a stupid law, right? But laws are immortal. Like, there might have been some point where, you know, 100 or 200 years ago or something, like there was some town being raided by the local Indian tribe and people were scared, so they passed a law, and maybe that protected them. Maybe it was relevant back then, but it's not relevant today. Like, things need to sunset. So Doge should be a massively beneficial thing for all of, you know, our federal government. And it should really improve deficits. It should surge the stock market. I mean, if America starts firing on all cylinders, we're in a beautiful place. Okay, so Federal Reserve monetary policy. This is another big one. Like, we're talking about Trump, we're talking about Biden. Oh, you know, before I hit Federal Reserve, I also want to hit like the escalations in the war that we've seen. In the last week and a half, the Biden administration gave Ukraine the ability to use ATACMS missiles. This is a very interesting escalation, and it looks like an attempt to create World War III, but I think we need to dig a little deeper than what the surface is, okay? And here's why. ATACMS missiles, and this is probably what you won't get on the news media, require American technology for them to do their targeting. They require Americans to launch them. And, you know, it basically means that America is now shooting missiles at Russia, okay? And immediately after America did that, England allowed for the, what are they called, the stealth fire or whatever, storm shadow missiles, I can't remember the name of them, but, you know, an equally powerful weapon launched into Russia. Russia, of course, reciprocated, showing us that, hey, you know, we have hypersonic missiles that can hit like 20 targets at once, and we're much more dangerous than you think we are. Don't piss us off. Look, we can shoot anywhere in Europe. And by the way, if we're feeling all safe here in the United States, people don't think of how close Russia is to the United States on their let's say, eastern border. Like, you know, you think Alaska, guys, Russia. Alaska is neighbors with Russia. There's like a little, you know, 2 islands that are divided, and it's like, I think 24 hours later, and you could swim between them if it wasn't so cold. So Russia's really close to us too. Like, we could have issues there as well. But I'm having trouble with the idea that Zelensky would just go start firing American and Russian long-range missiles into Russia, knowing Trump is 60 days out. You always have to look at everything and say, what's in it for me? And I don't have any source data on this. I don't have any reason that, like, I can come and say, oh, I think this is definitely a fact, but I think we ought to consider this. I think that, yeah, obviously Joe Biden's a vegetable. Obviously he's not all there anymore. But his advisors and his aides are not stupid. And nuclear war is good for no one. And escalate to de-escalate is not a reasonable strategy long-term to create the end of a war. But right now, with Trump going in and trying to find a way to create peace, which was one of his campaign promises, he needs to have some amount of leverage in the negotiation. And Biden, looking like a crazy person, allowing for an escalation into World War III, could be enough to create back-end pressure in Russia to say, hey guys, this is escalating very quickly, step by step, out of control. Nuclear war is good for no one. How do we stop? So, you know, we have what? One of a few different potential situations here. One, Biden, Zelensky, Keir Starmer from England are all warmongers. They want nuclear war. They want the end of the world, and they're all morons. But like, them and their families die too in that situation. So we kind of have to think, I mean, are they warmongers? Yes. Did they have a bad strategy? Yes. Did they think that Ukraine could actually keep up with Russia? I don't think so. I think that they thought that, you know, the more pain and problems in this war, the more inflation, the better for their economic system, the better for, they have a longer game strategy, the same as they do with this immigration bullshit that we saw for the last 4 years, right? And the strategies aren't generally that smart because the people enacting them don't realize that they're not going to maintain power for 20, 30 years to where they could enact them. They're going to have a 2, 3, 4 year, situation that they then have to come back and have cleaned up by the opposing party. Then, 4 years later, if they get back in, they're trying to leverage it the way that they want it. Like, I mean, this open borders idea was dumb. The, war with Russia using Ukraine was dumb. I mean, that was all about expanding NATO. That was all about, like, putting the screws to Russia and crashing their economy, which we didn't do. We just gave them a new trading bloc and created an axis that is against us. And some people now are questioning, okay, well, is there an axis of evil? Is it us? Is it them? So anyway, I've covered a lot, so I'm gonna go ahead and Dom, if there's any questions or comments or thoughts, like clarifications people need, if you're seeing any of that, bring it up, and if not, I can move on to Federal Reserve. You got anything for us?
I have a question. A person is asking me if you're an economist.
Am I an economist?
Yeah, he wants to clarify that.
I would not necessarily call myself an economist by education. I'm a businessman. And yes, I study the economy. I follow economists. I do not follow news media outlets because I think they're completely full of crap and they're designed to steer you in some direction to get you to vote. Would I call myself an economist? Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm a hard knocks economist, not an educated economist. I'm a guy that I don't get to sit back and just tell you what I think because I watch some graph. I actually invest my money and make my own business decisions based on the information that I get. So I'm an economist that's had to prove my worth with my own wealth and its growth or shrinkage over the last 15 years. And thank God, praise God, it's grown. We grew through the COVID recession, we grew through everything else. So yes, am I an economist? I'm an economist, but I don't really like the word economist because I think it's, with a few exceptions, not a word that, lends any credibility, because most economists out there, educated economists, they sit there and they're like, oh, here's what the stock market's doing. Oh, here's what the real estate market's doing. Oh, here's this, oh, here's that. I think a good economist is going to compare 20, 30, 40, 50 things. I mean, you have to be looking at geopolitics. You have to be looking at the different stock markets. Like, we don't have the only stock market. Like, there are stock markets all over the world. Like, there's, bond markets. You have to be looking at what is going on in the banking sector. What is the Fed doing? What are other governments doing? All of these things play in. Are there supply chain disruptions, like the war in, with Yemen and the Red Sea? Like, they're shooting boats. We're not going to be able to get boats in and out of there safely. So what do you think that's going to do? It's going to drive up the cost of shipping. So am I an economist? Sure. You can call me that if that's the word you like. Really, I'm just a practical thinker that makes money based on what I predict accurately.
And then there's someone else asking, do you think DOJ is bullshit?
Doge or DOJ?
DOJ.
Like the Department of Justice? Do I think it's bullshit? I think that you're probably asking about all the lawfare and the way that the left went after Donald Trump when he was running for office. And yeah, I think that was definitely a factor. I think that, it's almost inarguably a factor. The fact that Jack Smith is now asking all the judges to go ahead and just waive everything. Hey, we're going to cancel all of our legal attacks. If Trump was as bad as they said he was before, they wouldn't have stopped the attacks, okay? They're stopping the attacks because he won. They're stopping the attacks because the American people spoke. And I would say the American people didn't speak, they yelled. I mean, Trump had more coverage than Verizon if you look at the election map. So was there lawfare? Yeah, there was lawfare. And I think that lawfare is going to come back and bite the left in the ass because this Doge stuff is going to clean up a lot of the bureaucratic state. So is the Department of Justice bloated? Yeah. Is it important? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that we can function as a government or a society without a Department of Justice, but I think the Department of Justice has to have equality and fairness and a structure where everyone's equal, not where lawfare is possible. So hopefully that answers that question. Very good question. Any other questions?
It says, waiting on Department of Justice on new real estate update.
Oh, you want the real estate update?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think for real estate, and I'm not going to go into commercial real estate or industrial real estate heavily unless somebody asks questions on that. I think that I'm going to stick to housing because I know a lot of my audience is in the real estate world or the mortgage lending world, and we should stay there. So we saw, I think it was 42, 43 basis points. I haven't checked today, but as of yesterday, a 42 basis point reduction in interest rates based on Scott Bessent being appointed as the Treasury Secretary. And that just says that there's huge optimism with the bond traders, there's huge optimism in the real estate world. On the same token, we see that the Federal Reserve has started coming out verbally hawkish, okay? They're coming out verbally hawkish and they're saying, oh, you know what, like inflation's under control and the job market's where we want it and we don't know, we're thinking maybe we're gonna slow down rate cuts or we're not sure. And, you know, they do this a lot to prevent things from running. Like the Federal Reserve doesn't just use actual cuts or increases as a leverage play. They also use what they say as a leverage play. In the last 4 years, it was fascinating to watch, but, you know, Federal Reserve Chair Powell and really any of the Fed board members, when they spoke, they had more power than Joe Biden did, okay? When they came out and publicly said something from stage, any stage, didn't matter if they were at a paid speaking engagement, a conference, or actually reading the Fed minutes, their words were listened to more intently than anything that Biden said. You know, they weren't going to wander off stage. They weren't going to get lost. You know, nobody had to tell us whether they were cognitive or not. And the Fed is, in my opinion, right now saying that they're going to slow down rate cuts because they want to create some hawkishness in the market. They want to create some bearishness in the market. They saw the stock market boom after Trump got in. They're seeing Trump's appointments. They're seeing some of his announcements on what he's going to do. I mean, him coming out and saying we're going to drain the swamp, we're going to create term limits. I mean, guys, if he creates term limits, whether we love him or hate him, that removes so much fraud, so many lies, so many backdoor deals, so much backbiting. It gets rid of the institutional politician, okay? That would be maybe the greatest thing any president's done in 100 years, okay? And love him or hate him, like term limits would be a positive for America. I don't know anyone rational on the left or the right that thinks term limits are a bad idea, okay? So rates, where are they going? They're going down. And rates are directly tied to, in my opinion, so the way that you got to look at rates, you take the 10-year Treasury and you average, it's normally about 160 basis points to 200 basis points higher. Okay, and that's what you're going to see like a mortgage rate at, right? And the reason you use the 10-year Treasury is the same 10-year Treasury investors are also mortgage-backed security investors. Okay, so they're going to generally oscillate between the two similar types of investments. Now that arbitrage of 160 to 200 basis points was recently at 250, 260 basis points because all the bond traders and the mortgage-backed securities investors were freaked out by Trump's tariff talk. As soon as he appointed Scott Bessent, we saw a 42-point adjustment downward yesterday, guys. Like, that's probably, in all honesty, going to lead to more because it doesn't matter how a politician's lips move, it matters how their feet move. And what the big players, the guys on Wall Street, the big bond traders, the real players in the market, the guys that are bigger than the little small business guys like you or me, are looking at is they're looking at how their feet move because the trends are your friends. Lots of people say dumb shit. I mean, you had people saying, oh, men can have babies in the last 4 years. Like, if anybody said that to you, that's a stupid person. Like, I don't know anyone with male genitalia that can use that male genitalia to have a baby. So, like, people will say stupid shit to get attention, but that just means that they're stupid, right? Like, when people turn around and actually do things, well, that's what you can measure as real, okay? Like, we all saw Biden come out, no, we're gonna end American oil production. Oh, he was very bearish on oil when he first got elected 4 years ago, right? What happened when gas prices hit $5 a gallon and he had a midterms coming up? Oh, did he start backing off immediately? Did oil he wasn't going to sit down and take responsibility for doing that because, it would have assured he was going to lose an election. He did anyway, because anytime you take that much money out of your own constituents and voters' pockets, you lose, right? But it was amazing how much oil was a lower part of the conversation in the last 2 years. Why? Because gas prices went from $5 down to they're probably $2.50, $2.80 again. Why? Because we got energy production back up. He just did it real quietly. Why? Because it doesn't matter how your lips move. It matters how your feet move. So we know, going back to rates, that Trump is talking tariffs, which is why you're seeing the arbitrage there that's a little higher. It's closer to 200 basis points, I think. I haven't checked it today, over the 10-year Treasury. But there's a third investment, and that's money market accounts, right? Money market accounts are heavily affected by the Fed. If the Fed drops another 75 to 100 basis points, which really, guys, that's 3 to 4 more cuts, we're going to see those money market accounts becoming a lot less appetizing to the same investor that buys treasury bonds, the same investor that buys mortgage-backed securities, and you're going to see them jumping back into that space. That should drive rates lower. So what I'd be watching real closely is the Fed. Do I think that they're going to, like they're saying, be hawkish and not lower rates? No. Guys, we just had a 12,000 person jobs number. In this country, we need 150,000 new jobs every month, 1.8 million new jobs every year. Not part-time, full-time. Now, they count them the same way. So if you get a part-time job or a full-time job, they're counted the same way, which is another way that they lie with numbers. But you need 150,000 full-time jobs just to keep up with population growth, okay, per month. We got 12,000. That's a major red flag. So yeah, the Fed's coming out hawkish right now with their words, but I don't think they're going to slow their rate cuts. I think you're still going to get a 25 basis point rate cut. I don't think you're going to get 50. There's a lot of positives in the economy. The stock market's doing well. The bond markets are, improving. Geopolitics is really the big fear because we don't know what's going to happen. But all of a sudden, like, there's peace talks in the Middle East between Hezbollah and Israel. Like, Putin's saying, I'm willing to sit down and talk to Trump. Okay, I mean, like, there are signs that things might actually be improving there as well, which would lead into a pretty good age. I think that you're going to see rates in the fives, par rates in the fives for most mortgage borrowers, which will boom the market, okay? And I think you're going to see that, first quarter to second quarter of next year, based on where the Fed lowers. And I think the Fed has to keep lowering because I think they went a little too far. Remember, their dual mandate is employment and inflation. Well, inflation's kind of come back into equilibrium. 2025, they reset their goals. Right now they're saying, 2% inflation is the goal. You're never going to hit that. That's impossible. So every 5 years, which this year is I think the 5th year, they're going to reset that. And they may turn around and say, hey, you know what? 3% is a reasonable inflation goal. Now, they may not come out and publish that, but they have to balance inflation and jobs, okay? Now, jobs are still going down. Like, we're still losing on jobs. But on inflation, it started to go back up, which means that 2%, even with all their revisions and redactions and modifications and all the ways that they change the game, like, I mean, how many different inflation metrics do we have? And one for every day of the week, right? Whether it's PCE or CPI or PCE core. I mean, all these, you know what you really need for inflation? One metric, the one that's real, that people feel, but we won't use that. We need a different metric for every day of the week, depending on what we need for the government, right? So the Fed knows they're screwed. They can't admit they're screwed. They didn't start raising rates during COVID when they needed to. And, they dropped rates too early. They didn't start raising rates when they needed to. They waited too long. And then they waited too long to start, and they had to go up too quickly. And they stalled the economy. They didn't crash it. They stalled it. Okay, a lot of the YouTube people out there and all over the place, everybody's like, oh, it's a real estate crash. Oh, it's this crash. Oh, it's that crash. That's all clickbait. It's all fake shit, guys. They stalled it. Okay, like when you stall an airplane, it doesn't crash. Like, you just kind of go up a little bit, and then at a certain point, there's not enough power, and so you lose the ability to keep flying because the air doesn't go over and under the wings the same way, and so it kind of stalls. But it doesn't crash, it corrects, right? So our economy, I think, is going to come out of a stall in the next 4 to 7 months. And I think we're going to see an acceleration because there is pent-up demand, huge pent-up demand. People have been waiting on the fence. I've seen some incredibly high statistics. I saw one as high as like 86% of people have decided to wait for the last 2 years. I mean, if you add that up, like let's assume that's true, okay? 86% of people have decided to stay on the fence. If that is a true statistic, and I'm not sitting here saying it is, then that means you've had 14% of the home buyers and consumers coming out to spend actually do it that wanted to. Well, that's going to put you in a boom. And while we have had inflation to goods, we've also had some inflation to incomes. And we've had some, right sizing in the areas where there's value, okay? There's areas where there's not value or where there's less value than before. And that doesn't mean that your job is necessarily worth less. That means there's things coming and taking away some of the value that you offer to it. And normally those are the jobs that are the simple jobs, like the ones that AI can replace you with a reasonable amount of computing power and the right job description and the right measurable, deliverable KPIs. If your job is replaceable, yeah, you're not going to see wage inflation in that area. Like you've seen wage inflation in some areas and you've seen wage or not deflation, but inflation outpacing wages in other areas. Do we have a question?
Do you think with the new administration there will be a run on the market come March?
A run on the market's a weird term. What do you mean by run on the market? Like, do you mean like people are going to be dumping stocks? Like, I mean, I've heard that. Do you mean the market's going to like run, like bullish, like keep going up, or do you think it's going to bust? Yeah, I mean, see if they can clarify that.
Housing market.
I think you're going to see a lot of people coming into the housing market. As soon as the rates hit, mid to high fives, we already saw this. We saw, as a home builder, we got a little taste of this because we get great consumer data based on what we're seeing and what we can watch in our own local MLS, right? We're in a low-income city. We're in El Paso, Texas. Like, this is not Austin or Dallas where you have a plethora of qualified buyers just waiting in the wings. This is El Paso, Texas, right? And we saw it that when the rates hit kind of the low sixes and we were able to buy people down to the 4.75, we got a boom. Like, we got a straight boom. And I think we're going to see that coming. The other reason I think real estate's going to go well is because, there's security in real estate. Right now, if you go look at the PE ratios of most stocks are overvalued, dynamically overvalued. If you look at the income you're generating from each stock, like especially the large caps, like the PE ratios are insanely low. Like it's crazy. So I think a lot of people who have made a lot of money in stock are starting to turn around and say, okay, well, where can I go to be safe? Because what goes up will come down. Like everything's a bubble, right? Like it's just where you at in the bubble cycle. And the real estate bubble, we had an end cycle in '08. And with the end cycle in '08, where our bubble popped, you're kind of rebuilding that bubble now, but we're nowhere near a new end cycle because the fundamentals are there. Mortgages are based on very strict guidelines, which means if somebody is able to borrow on a loan, they're most likely going to pay their mortgage, okay? Two, I mean, housing, there's three things you look at if you're a good investor. One, is this a good investment for inflation? I'll give you an example. Does houses go up in inflation? Yes, they do. If I make you a loan, the value of my loan does not go up during inflation. What I loaned you money on, the asset might, but the loan doesn't. Like, so if things inflate 20% and I loaned you 100 grand last year and things inflate 20%, the house might be worth 120 now if it was worth 100. The loan's still only worth 100, which means the buying power of my dollar went to crap, right? Housing is an inflation win. Cash flow. Anything with a bedroom right now is a cash flow win. The real fundamentals in economics, guys, are supply and demand. And I look at supply and demand and I think it's interesting. We haven't had enough supply even to keep up with birth rate in housing since, 2007, 2008? We've had 500,000 per year unit disparity. That's before you factor the open border, that's before you factor migration between high income tax states and low income tax states like Florida and Texas. Guys, like, we're poised for a boom because we got to make up for 10 years, 15 years of not enough inventory. And once that inventory is produced and sold, then you'll see kind of a right sizing of the market and values and everything else. But houses are not going to go down in value. What's going to happen is everything else is going to kind of come up and equalize as things balance, right? A lot of people think that things inflate and then they got to deflate. No, things inflate and then other things have to catch up. So housing is going to be one of the things that inflates more than any other thing. And as mortgages come down and mortgage rates come down and affordability improves, you're going to see a tremendous amount of people that have been on the fence jumping in because of income opportunities, because of inflation hedge. And then the last one, which is huge also, you get a tax hedge. Your interest on a home is a write-off on your income tax. So you get tax benefits, whether it's interest or depreciation or otherwise, depending on what the government comes out with, and they probably will to stimulate houses. You get inflation and you get cash flow. I mean, it's win, win, win. You don't get that anywhere else. That was a very good question, by the way.
Gabriel made a comment. He said, I completely agree. I've been waiting to purchase a secondary house after the change of the new year.
I think you're wise. I don't think I'd be waiting because once the rates go down, you're going to see it's going to be a slippery slope. Okay. I can tell you as a home builder, we've already in specific markets started increasing our pricing. And it's because we've already noticed that the more sophisticated home buyers, the $500,000+ guys are already starting to buy, okay? They're already jumping because they know that even if they spend a little more on rate right now, they're gonna make up for it in price wildly and dynamically, okay? And they can refinance later. Like you date the rate, you marry the property, okay? So I honestly, Gabriel, I wouldn't wait. I would go and I would look for what you're wanting because right now, especially during the slow season, is when you're going to negotiate your best deals. If you wait till January, February, March, let's assume there's more rate improvements, there's going to be more buyers out there. I don't think you're going to see the bidding wars you saw during COVID, but you're not going to see, like it's, right now is the easiest time to get a product right now, and you'll get the best price right now. Is there any other questions? That was a very good question or comment from Gabriel.
Yes. One is, where do you think the news media industry is heading?
Oh, I think they're up a creek. I think it's a slow death. I think it's really interesting that you get guys out there like Musk who goes out and acquires Twitter, right? And it basically disrupted something. We all